What an exhausting year this has been. What an exhausting year and a half this has been. This 18-month stretch of COVID chaos has been disorienting, exasperating, and emotionally and physically exhausting. I'm going to take this off because I need to breathe. For most of us, the constant uncertainty of this ongoing threat that permeates every aspect of our daily lives, combined with the ever-rising tensions that have pitted one part of our society against another, has generated an unwavering malaise. In speaking with colleagues, in speaking with friends and relatives, children and adults alike, and so many of you, it has become absolutely clear that we are all in a bit of a funk. This past June, we thought the worst was behind us. We thought we had seen this pandemic come and go. We thought we were turning the corner soon to be able to gather together in a more normal rhythm in our daily lives. We thought that just maybe we could begin to be face-to-face in person with each other for an entire full congregation during these holy days. But the truth is, it's not over. And in some ways, this time around is even more frustrating than the first, even more scary and depressing than those first waves of this crisis. It is so frustrating to constantly have to wear a mask, but we know we need to. It is so frustrating to keep having to worry about how much distance we have between each other. It is so incredibly frustrating to have to keep our constant attention to whether this is a safe place or this is not a safe place. It's taxing, exhausting, and frustrating. This pandemic continues to force us into isolation and has generated serious challenges for large parts of our population, which will likely continue to linger for many years to come. Many of our children have gone almost 2 years without normal educational settings. Young adults have entered into the workforce with a compromised economy. Businesses are struggling to stay afloat. Some have gone under completely. Teachers are doing their best to keep our children caught up or to help them shape up or keep up as they are often falling behind. And God bless our doctors, our nurses, our care workers and first responders, and so many other professions who put their lives on the line every single day to keep us safe. This pandemic has been nothing short of crippling. And in many ways, as we try to slowly reemerge, re-engage, and return to work and school and a semblance of normalcy in our lives, we do so with trepidation and emotional fatigue. I don't know about you, but my mojo has been a no-go. Trying to get back into the rhythm of regular work, trying to write these sermons, trying to do whatever we do, has been harder than ever. And I know from talking with so many of you, I am not alone. In many ways, this COVID crisis mirrors the impact that other kinds of large catastrophes have had on our society. Hurricanes and floods and fires and earthquakes are all calamities which befall us and create tremendous amounts of disruption in life, It's a familiar feeling to all of us as we've all weathered these kinds of storms in the past. But 18 months? This is an awfully long time to have our lives in such disruption, emotional fatigue, and ongoing angst. In fact, in the face of this kind of life-altering interruption, it is not uncommon to ask, why? Why is this happening? Why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to my family? Why is this happening to my business? Why is this happening to the world? In my early career, I realized that in times of crisis, sitting by someone who is in grief, or sitting with someone and counseling them through illness, when people ask why, they are not asking for some kind of theological or philosophical dissertation. They're not asking for a lesson in theology. Rather, asking why is really a way of screaming out, often in pain and confusion, and doing so in a rhetorical way, challenging those forces that caused the frustrations or the pain or the loss or the grief in the first place. Today, on this first day of the Jewish calendar year, I feel like joining the entire world in a collective chorus of why? Why are we still in this mishigas? Why? And of course, there's no good answer. But I do strongly believe that our faith provides a framework and a pathway beyond the languish, beyond the frustration, beyond the confusion and the fog, which is suffocating and stifling so many souls at this time. Religion in general, and Judaism in particular, is uniquely poised to respond to questions of why. In contrast to the scientific responses, which seek to explain questions of why through theories and facts and data and statistics, religious responses to why in the world are more existential in nature. Thus, religion addresses our experiences in life in ways that logic and science might not. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who is the chief rabbi of the Orthodox communities in the British Commonwealth, makes an important observation about the differences between scientific and religious thinking. Rabbi Sacks argues that one of the functions of the mind is to break things down into their constituent parts and see how they mesh and interact. Another capacity for the human mind is to put things together to see how they tell a story. The best example of the first is science. The best example of the second is religion. Science takes things apart and looks at them to see how they work. Religion puts things together to see how and what they mean. A little more than a month ago, I sent out a survey to the entire congregation, asking each of you to answer the question as to what kinds of lessons you learned from your personal experiences over the course of this past 18-month disruption in our lives. Now, you may not have thought of this as a religious exercise, but as Rabbi Jonathan Sacks suggests, finding meaning in the madness is a big part of the religious endeavor.
I lost my dad during the pandemic, but during the months that eventually led to his passing, the safety protocols that kept me at home enabled me to spend every day with him as I worked from home. The curse of COVID, in this case, provided me with a painful silver lining. I never could have spent 4 months with my dad if COVID wasn't going on. He would have been alone. This painful period has taught me that despite the misery, the sacrifices, and the losses that have come with this crisis, sometimes things can be blessings even when they don't seem like it.
During these months, I learned how to make lemonade from lemon in two big ways. Firstly, my family discovered a way to share Shabbat over Zoom. Each Zoom call may only have lasted for 10 to 15 minutes, but it was one way we could stay connected as a family and in our Judaism. COVID also challenged me to dig deep into my creative juices and find a way to reinvent myself in my work and reimagine how to make a living in such a drastically altered world.
I've learned that isolation can lead to introspection, which can be good. Loneliness, which is not good, can lead to a constant state of sadness. This time has made me treasure my life with family and friends, and for the first time in my life, I feel grateful for technologies that enable me to connect with my loved ones from afar.
An unexpected benefit of this pandemic for me was a lesson on share space. As so many moved to working at home, sharing space with a spouse, with kids, we were reminded of the value of closed doors, of respect for privacy. I learned to be flexible, to be willing to change, to not be so set in our ways so much that a new rule, a new situation, a new recommendation put me in misery. Everything might be different tomorrow, better or worse, but I will have a lot more tomorrows. So today, I will try to deal with whatever happens.
The real lesson for me during these months is how much I need people in my life. No matter the number of Zoom conversations for families or organizations, nothing compares to face-to-face engagements.
These past 18 months have reinforced the values of gratefulness, patience, and the importance of socializing with family and friends. There is a saying in our family which sums it up for me. You can get used to hanging if you hang long enough. These months have tested all of us, as we have been left hanging long enough.
Due to the pandemic, we have been spending more time at home together and less time eating out, shopping, and traveling. That has been a good thing. Perhaps the most important result from the crisis has been that we have been spending more time together talking and enjoying each other's company. And we still like each other a lot. In a strange way, life has been a bit simpler and slower, which is a good thing to remember as we move forward.
All of these lessons must sound very familiar, as they were drawn from you. And these patterns, as I received many, are very common. The lessons represent a unique way to find meaning beyond the pains of this pandemic. Your narratives and perspectives help us frame this crisis in not by articulating what is or what was, but rather they help us to imagine how things might be. Each of your narratives enable us to see this COVID crisis as an opportunity to rethink what we value most and how we spend our time. In an article in Forbes magazine entitled "Finding Purpose in This Pandemic, Use This Crisis to Reset Your Life," Dr. Margie Worrell echoes many of the lessons that each of you provided. The truth is, she says, there's nothing like a global pandemic to make one step back and rethink life. If this pandemic has taught us anything, she continues, it is that life is both incredibly fragile and immensely precious. Yet amid a future filled with uncertainty lay untold possibilities to serve the world in new and more impactful ways. Living purposefully requires an ongoing effort to make lemonade out of lemons. And the key ingredients to making good lemonade in life includes letting go of our expectations, finding ways to be flexible, and continuously adjusting our attention to the things that matter most. Most of us have found ways to make some mighty good lemonade this past year, as this pandemic has forced us to step out of fast-paced and over-programmed rhythms in our daily lives, and has compelled us to pause, to recalibrate, and reconsider what it means to live with more meaning, with more purpose, and more balance. So here's the question. If we have indeed found a bit more balance in our lives during this long hiatus, by spending more time with our families, by finding a hobby like baking or gardening, which we've found many, then why the funk? And we might begin to reply and apply some of these lessons that each of you shared and the passions that we have found to reemerge from the crisis with more zeal. How can we begin to do this? Well, in addition to establishing a more balanced and meaningful rhythm in our daily lives, we might also be open to embracing change. The following story may be an inspiration to all of us if we need a little push. Houston lost one of its great baseball icons this past year. And for those who know the story of J.R. Richard, know the inspirational message that was woven through the ups and downs of his journey. J.R. Richard was considered one of the greatest Astros to ever pitch. And throughout his career, and though it was cut very short, many have compared him to some of the greatest pitchers of all time. J.R. Richard, when he was on the mound, was super hard to hit. He had a fastball that touched 100 miles an hour and an almost unhittable breaking ball. On top of it all, J.R. Richard was a giant on the mound. He stood at 6'8", and his towering presence intimidated anyone who stepped to the plate. In 1980, J.R. Richard was at the peak of his career when he suffered a debilitating stroke that ended his career at the age of 30. In the wake of his personal catastrophe, he fell on some very hard times. The stroke not only ended his ability to pitch, but it also made it extremely difficult for him to find new employment. As a result of bad business decisions, 2 divorces, and the repercussions of his stroke, Richard lost his home, and at one point during the 1990s, he was living under a bridge right near Highway 59. Can you imagine going from a hero of the city of Houston pitching in the Astrodome to living on its streets? For most of us, such a fall would be beyond comprehension. But with faith and with fortitude, J.R. Richard found his way back. He became a minister and refused to be defeated by the circumstances of his crisis. He allowed religion to help him translate his shortcomings into a narrative that did not ask the question, why did this happen to me? But rather, he asked the question, how do I make sense of what has happened to me and move forward? J.R. Richard, in his own unique way, was echoing the teachings of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, who I quoted earlier, who postulated that religious thinking revolves around the mind asking questions through the lens of purpose and meaning. The way J.R. Richard put it in an interview I recently heard on National Public Radio, to get something you never had, you got to do something you never done. To get something you never had, you got to do something you never done. He further went on to say, I changed my way of thinking. I changed my attitude. I refused to do the same old things and act the same old way. In recreating his life as a minister, J.R. Richard used his breakdown to create a breakthrough. With newfound meaning and hope and purpose and direction, he not only got his life back on track, but he inspired countless others to do the same. Sometimes life is going to throw us some curveballs. And when it does, each of us is going to need to readjust our stance and swing accordingly. Sometimes these adjustments may be minor. Other times they may be major. But whatever the case may be, we need to keep our eye on the ball. Living with purpose and meaning demands that we constantly keep our eye on the ball. We need to continuously focus on the things that matter most, and we need to learn from stories like that of J.R. Richard and so many of our own, that the road to our discovery of that purpose and meaning is there for us to take. But it's not always a straight path. Who we are and who we hope to become is a reality which lies at a crossroads, at an intersection of what we're good at, what we care about, and where we might add meaning to the world around us. The long pause of these 18 months has provided many of us to take the time to find these personal qualities and see them in a new light. COVID has forced us to recognize and reconsider what we want and what we value. And if we hope to reemerge from this emotional sluggishness that seems to be consuming so much of our society, we are going to need to find ways of weaving what we have learned from this COVID chaos into what we long to become. We are going to need to be willing to push ourselves beyond our fears and our trepidations. We are going to need to find a sense of hope in our hearts and a sense of purpose in our strategies. If we hope to find some kind of breakthrough through this breakdown, we need to figure out how to tap into that religious part of our brains and ask the questions of not what happened or why did this happen, but rather what might be and how can I translate what I've experienced into something positive in the world. This first day of 5,782 invites us to be as bold and as courageous as J.R. Richard. It implores us to take a serious look at the past and translate those lessons into meaningful changes for the future. Today is a new day. Today is a new beginning. Today we commit ourselves collectively and individually to the task of making lemonade out of the lemons of this pandemic. Today we pledge ourselves that no matter what curveballs may come our way, we can and we will find the strength to face the fragility and the wisdom to face the uncertainty that permeates so much of our society. Rosh Hashanah and the days of awe to come offer us a time to look inward, to reflect, to reevaluate who we are, who we want to be. This season invites us to consider whether or not we have reached our potential and offers us powerful ways to find some meaning beyond this madness. The chaos of COVID may not yet be over, but this does not mean that we need to wallow in despair. These holy days ahead provide us with powerful opportunities to forge ahead in new ways, create a new beginning with hope in our hearts as we enter this new chapter in our books of life. So please join me, if you are so inclined right now, to say that blessing that recognizes the gratitude for what we have and instills within us a sense of hope for the future. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shehechianu v'kiyamanu v'higianu lazman hazeh. Praised are you, eternal our God, ruling Spirit of the universe, who gives us life, who sustains us, and provides us with regular opportunities to celebrate and embrace the joys of life itself. Amen.